In the shadows of Christianity, there are objects that blur the line between the sacred and the sinister. Bones preserved in gold, blood that defies decay, fragments of saints scattered across continents. These are relics, and just because they're holy doesn't mean they're not disturbing. From the incorruptible tongue of a medieval preacher to the 30 pieces of silver that bought the life of God himself, these artifacts hold secrets, dark secrets, secrets the church has guarded for centuries. But what are these relics? How do they work? And what truths do they reveal about faith, obsession, and humanity's need to possess the divine? Before we descend into the darkness, we need to understand what relics actually are. Across many branches of Christianity, especially in Catholicism, relics are sacred objects that preserve the remains of holy saints. Believers often use them in their prayers, appealing to a saint to intercede for them before God. Today, relics come in all shapes and sizes, but the church divides them into 3 distinct classes. First class, the actual physical remains of a saint, bones, organs, blood. Second class, objects that were personally owned or used by a saint, clothing, tools, books. Third class, items that have come into contact with either a first or second class relic. As we proceed down our list, we will see many different types of these relics, some of which are quite literally the preserved remains of the saint. Let's begin with our first relic. Saint Anthony of Padua is one of the most revered saints in Catholic history, a legendary preacher. His relic speaks to his greatest gift, his voice. This is the tongue of Saint Anthony. Meant to preserve the essence of the saint's speech, the remains are housed in this ornate reliquary, lavishly adorned with gold and jewels. Above it rests an intricately carved golden halo that encircles where the saint's head would be. At first glance, it may even appear as though it has eyes, but this effect is just a reflection of the glass. Viewed from another angle, the illusion disappears entirely. It's certainly a haunting object, yet there's something strangely beautiful about it, and the story behind it is just as mysterious. Saint Anthony was a preacher like no other. In one story, even the fish would gather to hear him speak, but his life was cut short. He succumbed to illness at the age of 35. 30 years after his death, his body was exhumed, and what was found there shocked everyone. According to legend, his tongue and jaw had been perfectly preserved, not decayed, not rotted, perfect. Many believed it was a sign that his voice had been blessed by God, that words spoken in faith cannot die. For over 700 years, St. Anthony's incorruptible remains have been kept on display. Pilgrims from around the world continue to visit Padua to venerate his holy relic. Nowadays, St. Anthony remains the patron saint of lost things. So if you ever find yourself searching for something lost, look no further than his sacred tongue. Speaking of lost things, next, we turn to one of Christianity's most enigmatic figures. Beneath the crypt of a basilica in France lies a humble skull, housed in a lavish gold reliquary. This is the head of Mary Magdalene. Believed to be one of Jesus' closest companions, her head is supported by 4 angels, their outstretched hands acting as a stand. Taken as a whole, it's a truly magnificent artifact. Beyond its stunning medieval craftsmanship, this relic holds another intriguing backstory, and possibly the secrets of the saint herself. While not counted among the 12 disciples, Mary Magdalene plays a crucial role in the story of Jesus. She was present at the crucifixion, and among the first to witness his resurrection. Yet little is known about what happened to her afterwards. According to one popular legend, she sailed to France to found one of the earliest Christian communities. These legends gained momentum when, in 1279, a mysterious woman's skull was found in a tomb dating back to the 1st century. And of course, it didn't take long for people to speculate that this was the saint herself. In recent years, renewed attention has been given to this relic. 2 forensic artists used the skull to create a 3-dimensional reconstruction of the person's face. The result was this: an image of a woman of Mediterranean descent. Could this be the face of Mary Magdalene? Well, it's impossible to know for sure, but researchers are now working to create a full-body rendering using other relics associated with the saint. Regardless, the relic of Mary Magdalene endures, forever preserved in this beautiful yet haunting reliquary. A woman who saw Jesus rise from the dead now stares at us. Teresa of Avila wrote of visions, of angels piercing her heart with golden spears, of pain so beautiful it felt like rapture. She died in 1582, but her body would not stay whole. Her arm was severed, taken, enshrined. It travelled to Rome, to Lisbon, and eventually into the hands of Francisco Franco himself. The Spanish dictator kept it in his bedroom as a talisman of divine favour. This is the arm that wrote the interior castle, that reached toward God in ecstasy, that trembled with divine love. Now it's a trophy, a weapon, a political symbol. Teresa spoke of union with God, of love beyond flesh. But we cannot let go of the flesh, can we? We tear saints apart, we parade their bodies, we kiss their bones as if proximity to death brings us closer to heaven. Perhaps the most terrifying relic isn't the arm itself, it's what we do with it. Catherine of Siena was a mystic, a prophet, a woman who challenged popes and princes with nothing but words and faith. She died at 33, the same age as Christ, and like Christ, her body was divided. Her head is here, in Siena, her thumb, in Florence, her foot, in Venice. She is scattered, fragmented, distributed like communion wafers across Italy. Look at her face, skin tight against bone, lips pulled back in what could be a scream, or perhaps a prayer. Catherine once said, she drank pus from the wounds of the sick. That suffering was her sacrament, that pain was the only path to God. And now she is worshipped in fragments. Is this honour or desecration? Is this faith or madness? This next relic belongs to one of the most important figures in the New Testament, John the Baptist. According to the Gospels, John met a grisly fate. He was imprisoned and eventually executed by King Herod. His head was gifted to the king's daughter on a platter. Now, what happened to his head remains a mystery, but in the centuries that followed, not one but 4 different places have claimed to have found his grim relic. The most famous is kept here, in the Cathedral of Amiens, a skull enshrined on a gold platter, just like in the story. But it's not the only one. In Rome there's a skull fragment complete with a wax head. In Munich a separate head is kept on display, wrapped in fine cloth adorned with pearls and jewelled roses. And the final alleged head is not housed in a church at all, but in a mosque. The Umayyad Mosque in Damascus contains a shrine dedicated to John the Baptist, who is also a revered prophet in Islam. So, multiple heads, but only one John the Baptist. Although a multi-headed prophet would make for some pretty hardcore Christian art, it's an unusual predicament, but surprisingly common. During the Middle Ages, relics were in high demand, and there were always people willing to supply them. It's often joked that if you gathered all the alleged fragments of the true cross, you'd have enough wood to build a small forest. The relic debate. So far we've seen relics that disturb, fascinate, and confuse, but we're only scratching the surface. It's a miracle that any of these have actually survived. You see, there were times in history when they were nearly lost altogether. During the Protestant Reformation, many relics were viewed as idolatrous, seen to be contradicting biblical teachings against graven images. In those turbulent years, churches were looted and burned, Christian art was defaced, and countless relics were destroyed. In Catholicism, however, they were not seen as a problem. In fact, the Church clarifies that believers do not worship the object or even the saint it belonged to. Instead, relics are venerated, used as a spiritual aid, a way for a saint to pray on their behalf. Think of them as a telephone to heaven. Of course, the debate over relics has persisted for centuries and will likely continue for many more, but few relics have garnered as much controversy as our next one. This 14-foot-long linen cloth has had a remarkable history. If you look closely at the fabric, you'll see the faint outline of a person, When enhanced, the image reveals the figure of a bearded man with long hair, bearing scars that suggest he might have been executed. Many have speculated that this is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, and it's not without reason. It closely matches many historic depictions of Jesus throughout art. Of course, if this relic really belonged to Jesus, it would be one of the most valuable and sacred relics in history. But while the shroud presents a compelling image, it's not without its detractors. Since 1988, several laboratories have used radiocarbon dating and have placed the cloth within the mid-14th century, well within the medieval era. This has led many to suspect it as a forgery, albeit an incredibly convincing one. However, the results have been hotly debated ever since. As recently as 2022, Italian researchers used a pioneering X-ray technique to analyze a small segment of the shroud. Their findings suggest that the linen appears to date between 55 to 74 CE, a time frame that aligns closely with the historical period of Jesus' burial. When announced, these results caused a stir. Could this really be the face of Jesus? As of this video's release, further testing is ongoing, and not everyone is convinced. In the meantime, we'll have to await the results of future studies. But one thing is certain, whether it's real or not, this image haunts. Because perhaps the truth doesn't matter. Perhaps what matters is that we need it to be real. Until now, we've discussed holy relics, but now it's time to talk about the unholy relics, like the so-called Judas coins, the 30 pieces of silver that Judas Iscariot received in exchange for betraying Jesus. One of these coins is believed to be kept in a museum in Ireland. This ancient decadrachm dates to the classical era and is engraved with figures from Roman mythology. But what's most intriguing is the gold band around its edge, inscribed with the Latin phrase, "This is the price of blood." The inscription, of course, implies that the coin once belonged to Judas Iscariot, although it's impossible to verify such a claim, and historians agree that the gold rim is likely a later addition. That said, this relic is directly tied to one of the most infamous betrayals in the Bible. It's said that whoever touches the coin will be plagued with bad luck, but think about that. We venerate the instruments of betrayal, the currency of damnation. We kiss the coins that bought Christ's death. Why? Because we understand Judas. Deep down, we are Judas. We sell what we love for comfort, for security, for 30 pieces of whatever currency we value most. And these coins remind us that betrayal is sacred too, that even the worst of us is part of the story. Over the course of this journey, we've seen relics that connect us to saints, and in some cases sinners. As a collection, they straddle the line between the deeply disturbing and the hauntingly beautiful. Of course, relics like these offer many Christians a sacred connection to the divine, and not all of them are dark. But these particular relics, they reveal something else. They show us what we're willing to do for God, how far we'll go, how much we'll consume. We tear saints apart. We parade their bodies. We kiss their bones, not because God demands it, but because we cannot live without it. And relics like these were never meant to be feared. They were meant to be adored. While today they may seem unsettling, the Christianity of old was far more comfortable with things that we might now consider dark. To me, these relics connect us to something unknowable, a far more ancient side of Christianity that the world has in many ways moved away from. They remind us that faith was never meant to be comfortable. It was meant to be visceral, raw, real. Perhaps the most terrifying relic of all isn't on display in any church. It's inside us, the piece of the sacred we carry, the shard of divinity we hoard, the hunger that never stops. Thank you for walking through the relics of shadows and grace. These stories connect us to something far older than ourselves, something we've tried to forget but never quite can. If you found beauty in this darkness, subscribe to Noctha, because some stories aren't meant to be remembered, they're meant to haunt.